When I look back over the last 15 dramatic years and reflect on the way in which we presented ourselves, both as a community and as individuals, the messages that we transmitted to our priests and to the laity, there is nothing that we have to be ashamed of, either written or spoken, in our appeals and invitations, because we remained faithful to the universal principles of the Catholic Church, which are principles that aspire to protect every human being. Now, looking back on everything that has taken place, the thing that stands out in my mind is the visit of a certain politician who said to my face amid tears, "Your Grace, your diocese doesn't exist." Heavens, what do you mean it doesn't exist? It's been decided that it will cease to exist. What do you mean? We can decide that my diocese doesn't exist? We've waited so long for democracy to come along, and now in the name of democracy I don't exist? How come? Even during the worst times of the Ottoman Empire, even during communism, the Catholics still managed to endure here. That's what I'm here to tell you. Of course, this was something that I just couldn't accept. I must admit, at that time it disturbed me greatly. Afterwards, having witnessed everything, it became clear to me that this man was informed about a wider scenario, about the way things were set up. It was a scenario that was planned long before the war, about how to uproot the Catholic community from Banja Luka. I mean from Bosnia-Herzegovina.
Bishop Komarica has his roots in an age-old Banja Luka family. They had been loyal to the faith of their fathers, rich in belief and hope. God had granted them the blessing of a prolific family and the gift of song. In that spirit of Christianity and joyfulness, Franjo was born in 1946.
My parents were deeply faithful to their Christian calling. Prayer was fundamental and obligatory in the morning and at night. Family prayer. Sunday we attended Mass. There was no question about it. It was my mother remaining in the home who practically single-handedly brought us up. My father was busy at the railroad. I cannot thank God enough for having that sort of parents who loved each other constantly and gave us a rich example of interpersonal love and a readiness to sacrifice themselves for their children.
His yearning for truth and his solid links with his family, especially his mother, are permanent and familiar features of Bishop Komarica and his life. It was precisely through his mother that the bishop came to play a special role in the life of Dr. Mustafa Sefic.
I got to know Bishop Komarica under very special circumstances. I got to know him as a son. I had to operate on the cataract of his mother. It was then that I could see that this respected bishop is an ordinary man, a child of his mother. He demonstrated great concern and sensitivity towards his parent, as a child who had been well brought up, sometimes responding to even exaggerated requests of the elderly woman. It made a deep impression on me. It pleased me a lot because I too had a very patriarchal upbringing, and it made me happy to see such a remarkable relationship, even when he was such an important man. But what made the deepest impression on me was the happiness and satisfaction that was evident when he saw that his mother could see again. And you can imagine my satisfaction too.
In 1963, he completed his high school education in the classical gymnasium in Zagreb, and then theology in Innsbruck in Austria, where he completed a doctorate in liturgy. In the philosophical faculty, he was completing studies in music and anthropology. On his return to Bosnia in 1978, at the request of the Archbishop of Sarajevo, Father Marko Jozinovic, he was transferred to the seat of the Archbishopric in Sarajevo, where he dedicated himself to his work as a professor at the seminary. There, in 1985, news reached him of the Pope's decision to make him a bishop.
I was really astounded knowing what communism was like. I was still very young. What does it mean to be young? Goodness, for that sort of responsibility, I really didn't consider myself qualified.
In Zadar, news of the naming of Komarica as the new bishop reached his good friend, who today is Cardinal Vinko Puljic.
I rejoiced twice over. Firstly, because it was my school friend that was chosen to be my bishop, and secondly, because that responsibility wasn't put on my shoulders. But that second rejoicing didn't last very long. Soon that responsibility came to me too. Then, as the parish priest of Bosanska Gradiska, I had the honour of leading the ceremony for his episcopal ordination.
The Croatian Catholics of the Diocese of Banja Luka looked on in fear when aggression against Croatia broke out only 10 kilometres from their border. In Banja Luka itself, the inhabitants, who were Catholic and Muslim, began to fear. The first abuses and murders began to take place. The Serbian nationalists who were in power began to mobilise everyone into their army. To refuse to mobilise meant automatic dismissal from your job, deporting from your home, and further abuse.
We were dumbfounded as we watched the convoys of tanks, cannons and ammunition lorries as they made their way past from Serbia and central Bosnia during the war in Croatia, driving death down there. So we organised prayer services in the parishes and in the homes of the people. We even managed to organise an ecumenical service here in the cathedral on the 1st of January, on the 3rd in the mosque of Banja Luka, and in the Orthodox Church on the 6th of January. We organised joint prayer services against the war. I proclaimed loudly that even if, God forbid, all my Banja Luka inhabitants were for the war, I would still stand up against it. No to war. No to war. Let's hang on to the greatest treasure we have, our community spirit. Let's hang on to our city. Let's protect Banja Luka and hang on to the good relationships that we have.
Even through the horrors of the war events of 1992, when many of the faithful suffered affronts, as did the priests and the church, still the bishop never lost faith that peace was possible. One of his closest co-workers can testify to this, Father Ivica Bojinovic.
Bishop Komarica, as I remember him, and I was with him from 1992 right up to today, was firstly very thorough in the care of his parishioners. Wherever it was possible, he would go and visit them. That's a fact. He had endless patience in listening to them. And usually in the evening, when we would return home and we would light the petrol lamps, when there were power cuts, he would take hold of his old typewriter and he would write and write and write. He never got tired of writing protests. I don't know if there is anyone who played a role in this war who didn't get at least one letter from Bishop Komarica. And what is strange, even today it's strange, in fact I really cannot believe it when we meet these people face to face, and they insist that they didn't know what we were going through. They maintain, if they had known, they would have done something, regardless of whether they were local or international representatives. It's just not true. Every Sunday in the cathedral, the bishop spoke openly. He really spoke openly. Many were taken aback. Of course, I had never learned or studied in preparation for these exceptional circumstances, nor had I any idea how one should behave. But there was one incident which I think made a difference to my life. Well, it was late July 1992. We had heard the terrible things were happening in the area of Prejdor, so I sought permission to carry out the confirmations in one of the parishes which was also in the mountains, 80 kilometers outside Banja Luka. And I received permission both from the civil as well as the military authorities. Of course, you can go, Your Grace. Here are your papers. So I set off with my secretary, and somewhere up in the mountains I was stopped by a group of armed men dressed in military garb, about 10 of them. Out of the car. What is it? What's the problem? As soon as we got out of the car, they took it and drove it off somewhere. 10 of them were aiming their guns at me, and the 11th took the car off somewhere. The car was no longer around. We were just standing there, and I said, "Put the guns away. What's not clear to you? What's wrong?" "We have been waiting for you for so many years." "What do you mean, waiting for what?" "To kill you." "How will you kill me?" In that moment, something happened within me that took me by surprise. It transformed me. At least that's the way I experienced myself even after that moment. It was as if a voice spoke within me saying, "If your life can save another life, that'll be taken today or tomorrow or whenever, then why not give it? For what reason should yours be more valuable? Be ready to give it now." Then I said, "God, you know everything. My life is at your disposal. If it is your will that I give it to save others, then so be it, and glory to your name." I was unrecognizable even to myself. It was as if something else was working within me. From that moment on, I wasn't afraid at all. Not at all. Then one of them called the others, and obviously I was still alive, saying, "Come over here, come here." They went over to one side and spoke among themselves and said, "We've decided against killing you. You can go. Go wherever you want. Go on." I said, "I'm not going anywhere. Nowhere am I going. How can I go? Give us back our car and we'll be on our way. We know where we are going, and you know that we are going to that parish to have a mass there. There are children waiting there for us. We have confirmations today. You know that when a bishop arrives, that's quite a special occasion. There's no car, you'll have to go on foot. We're about 30 kilometers away. We're only halfway there. Will you give us back our car?" They didn't want to give the car back to us, so I asked of them, "Then bring me back to Banja Luka."
In that superhuman capacity of patience and misunderstanding, Bishop Komarica often surprises people with his power to summon and point out Christian values.
There was another case just before that, before the war had even begun in Bosnia, at the end of March. The police patrol had killed a young Croat there on the outskirts of Banja Luka, with no provocation whatsoever at evening time. And of course the people cried out. It's mainly Catholics, Croats, who are in that area. I myself went to that funeral, and it was huge. And I know how much I prayed to God and begged the people, "No, no and no. This young man, innocent as he is, can actually save all our lives. Don't let this incident ambush you, and then you start to seek revenge. And God forbid you maim, wound or kill someone, and then you will have totally lost your foothold. So don't give in." The gospel is very clear. Whoever stones you, you give him bread. Who puts a bullet in you, you forgive him. Don't do anything to him even if he kills you. Jesus tells us very clearly, Love your enemies. Do good to those who persecute you.
The years of great destruction followed. Killings, sabotage of churches. As if that wasn't enough, the bloodiest event of all was enacted at the end of the war in 1995.
The international representatives watched on. They never tried to stop it. They confined me to my house here at the beginning of May so that they could pursue their aggravation as planned. That's when the last 30,000 Catholics left, were bullied out of Banja Luka in the summer of 1995, with the blessing of the International Red Cross. But it never occurred to me, not even in my wildest dreams, to abandon Banja Luka. On the contrary, I kept saying, even if everybody leaves, you will have to tie me up and take me away by force, only by force. It doesn't even enter my head. I'm staying here, dead or alive. I put my life at the Lord's disposal a long time ago. From the beginning of the war, in the crucial moment, I put my life at his disposal in exchange for at least one life. And I thought it necessary for me to stay in Banja Luka because of the right that the Lord's gospel has over this place. I felt I had to stay in Banja Luka, even to Golgotha if necessary. I had already thought it through. And not only that, a man can only speak for himself, and in that capacity, only with God's help. But that's how all my diocese behaved, my priests and nuns and religious orders. They stayed too. And even when they killed one of us, the rest remained. They didn't leave. And when they killed a second, they didn't leave. We were all just waiting for our turn. That for me was so magnificent, so confounding, so dramatically shocking that I cannot help but recognize the hand of God in all of it. In 1995, the bishop called us together and said, with the situation, anyone who wishes to is free to leave. Nobody will blame him. We priests decided that the curates leave first, they're young, and then any of the parish priests who want to, so any of us could have left. The bishop said, I will stay, you can all leave, I won't hold it against anyone. I decided to stay, not because I am brave, I was really afraid. The only thing that was bothering me was that when those who hadn't left and had held out throughout the hardship, how would I feel returning and saying, well, it's all over now, here I am, I'm coming back now. I thank God that He watched over my people here in Banja Luka, that the Catholics here never raised their fists against their neighbours, and the people here know that too, the Serbs and the Muslims. They all acknowledge that, although not publicly. It'll probably sound strange, but even in the worst days, I didn't go to my own Muslim clergyman, which would have been normal. But instead, my relationship with Bishop Komarica deepened, because there was so much that drew us closer together. He understood me better, and I understood him. So much so that he really helped me a lot in that period. What made his character so beautiful was his love for the church. He loved his people, and he was never afraid to sacrifice himself for them. And in every situation, and sometimes it was impossible to understand, he would be singing. Sometimes we thought, what is it now? How can he still be singing when we are all at the verge of tears? But with song, he had a victory over all the suffering of life.
Sveti oče, nasljedniče apostolskoga prvaka, prvosvećeniče Ivane Pavle II, Je li ovo doista stvarnost, a ne nekakav privid da ste vi osobno danas ovdje kod nas u Banjoj Luci?
Dolazak Svetoga Oca.
The arrival of Pope John Paul II in Banja Luka was for me a miracle that could only have been worked by Blessed Ivan Merz. I said to the Holy Father when we were together here in the Bishop's Palace in Petricevac, Holy Father, I cannot thank you enough for what you did today, and I have to say that for me this was another miracle worked by Blessed Ivan Merz.
Despite the bitter experiences of the recent past, the bishop is not giving in and still persists in working on ecumenical events.
We opened a Catholic school centre here in which there are far more non-Catholics than Catholics, and that is one dimension of ecumenism and dialogue here. It is the second school centre of its type. The first is in Banja Luka and the second in Bihać, where there are far more Muslim children than Catholics. We are open and we desire to be open, and the sun cannot do anything else but shine.
In spite of all the horrors and the tragedies that cannot be erased, the bishop, with trust in God, dreams that a new day will dawn for these people to whom he devotes himself. He is a tangible presence in the lives of the ordinary people, from childhood through to old age. The bishop's care is something that has marked the lives of people like Anja Vukovic.
Whenever we learnt our catechism well, he had kind words for us, a smile and words of praise. Even from my earliest days, from my first contact with him. Later, when we had grown up and we were involved in the parish, we had more contact with him. He would come to celebrate the feast on the day of the patron saint of our parish. He would always stop to say a few words to us. In that way, we could always go to him with our problems or ask him for help. And he would always be there for us. He would always listen. He understood us best of all.
Gdje ste vi meni junaci? Evo. Pa, Marija, pa je li moguće da ja vas vidim? Dobrodošli iz bijeloga svijeta. Evo, Marija,
bio sam i Svetoga Roka.
Da, svaka vam čast, svaka čast. Dobro došli.
Eto vam imen dan.
Pa i jeli, hvala me.
Te uzvišeni treba neko častiti.
Ono što se mora reći za našeg biskupa.
The one thing that we really have to say about our bishop is that he is persistent, really persistent. The second is that he understood and undertook his role seriously, and that he found himself not only as a spiritual leader of his people, but as a true leader. And he is that even today. People really depend on him. He knows how to talk to the ordinary man on the street, and they really appreciate that. He doesn't try to avoid them. I would even say that in that he even exaggerates, because people aren't always sincere. And our bishop, he believes everyone totally, and he believes them from first off. There are a few wishes that I haven't yet brought to fruition. Definitely one of those is that, if God gives me strength and time, I will hold the Bishop's Synod, which I started to prepare in 1990. We completed a great deal of it while the war was still raging in Croatia in 1991, but then we had to hold off because terrible tragedies were taking place here. It's a non-fulfilled wish. A second, and in fact a far more important wish, is that those who wish to return to their homelands, to their parishes and burnt-out ruins, that would be made possible, politically, legally and materially, and not just that they can come back, but that they can stay and live their lives in the dignity of man, and not like slaves or secondary citizens or the dregs of society. Their basic human rights and civil rights should be made available to them, among which is the right to freedom of religious choice, ethnic identity, cultural background, and the freedom to speak their own language, etc. That is really my deepest wish, and it's not only a wish for me, it's actually a mission for which I must consistently and persistently push for. In the face of all the dramas which followed, which I really could never have imagined nor dreamed of, I feel that I haven't lost my orientation. I didn't abandon the cause nor despair. What will become of us, or how will we fare out? No, God knows what will be of me tomorrow, and the day after tomorrow. He leads my footsteps, and that's why, God help me, enlighten me, so that I can recognize your will and give me strength to bring it to fruition.